Imagine this. It's 1908. Roads barely exist. Gas stations? None. Yet 6 daring teams from 4 nations decide to drive, yes, drive 22,000 miles from New York to Paris. Through snow-buried plains, endless mud, and frozen Siberia, these early machines battled storms, breakdowns, and pure exhaustion. What began as a wild dream became the most impossible race ever attempted, one that would change how the world saw the automobile forever. Buckle up. This is the unbelievable true story of the 1908 New York to Paris race. In the early 1900s, the automobile was still a novelty, loud, unreliable, and often dismissed as a passing fad. But in 1908, a bold idea captured the world's imagination, a race across the planet. The goal was simple yet insane: drive from New York to Paris, covering over 22,000 miles of frozen rivers, deserts, and mountains, at a time when most people had never even seen a paved road. 6 cars from 4 nations, the United States, France, Germany, and Italy, lined up in Times Square on a cold February morning. The event was called the Great Race, and it promised fame, fortune, and a chance to prove which country built the most capable automobile. The American Thomas Flyer, the German Protos, and the French de Dion-Bouton were among the favorites. Each car carried not just its drivers, but the pride of an entire nation. Newspapers around the world followed their progress daily, turning these unknown adventurers into heroes. This wasn't just a race. It was a test of endurance, engineering, and sheer human will. There were no GPS systems, no spare parts shops, and no maps for most of the journey. From the icy plains of Siberia to the muddy roads of Alaska, these drivers faced the impossible, often relying on local villagers, horses, and luck to survive. Little did they know, this 6-month odyssey would become one of the most legendary races in automotive history, redefining what people believed cars and humans could truly do. The starting line was Times Square, New York City, February 12, 1908. Crowds gathered in disbelief, watching 6 brave teams set off into freezing weather, bound for Paris by car. Their route was nothing short of madness, across the snow-choked American Midwest, up through the Pacific coast, over the Bering Sea to Russia, through Siberia, and finally across Europe to the Eiffel Tower. The first challenge struck immediately. The American Thomas Flyer, led by George Schuster, plowed through blizzards and mud while other teams fell behind. Roads ended abruptly in open plains, and where bridges didn't exist, they built their own, with axes and planks. The cars often sank in snowdrifts, and horses had to pull them out. Fuel stations? There were none. Drivers relied on blacksmiths, farmers, and even railway workers to siphon fuel and repair broken parts. Every breakdown meant hours of improvisation, tying engines with wire, patching tires with leather, or melting snow for radiator water. The German Protos team, well-organized and disciplined, surged ahead through North America, but faced controversy later when it was shipped part of the way to avoid impossible terrain. Meanwhile, the Italian Zust struggled heroically with mechanical failures but refused to quit. The French de Dion-Bouton and César-Naudin teams, though innovative, couldn't withstand the brutal journey and fell out early. Crossing into Alaska, the dream of driving around the world seemed shattered. There were no roads to Russia. The teams had to reroute, shipping their cars to Vladivostok, Russia, to continue through the endless mud and permafrost of Siberia. Here, progress slowed to a crawl, sometimes just a few miles per day. Drivers faced freezing winds, collapsing bridges, and even wolves stalking their camps at night. By the time they reached Europe, only 3 cars remained: the Thomas Flyer, the Protos, and the Zust. The Americans, through a mix of determination and mechanical brilliance, managed to regain the lead they had lost. On July 30, 1908, after nearly 6 months of grueling travel and over 22,000 miles, the Thomas Flyer finally rolled into Paris, greeted by cheering crowds and flashing cameras. The impossible had been done. What they proved wasn't just that cars could survive such a journey, but that the automobile was no longer a fragile experiment. It was the future of global travel. The 1908 New York to Paris race was more than a competition. It was a defining moment in the story of human ambition. At a time when most people doubted that cars could travel even a few hundred miles without breaking down, these pioneers drove across continents. The first major highlight was engineering innovation. Each team had to become its own mechanic, inventor, and survival expert. The Thomas Flyer's crew famously repaired their car in the middle of Siberia, using nothing but wire, rope, and raw determination. That level of adaptability would later inspire the idea of field repair and endurance engineering in automobiles. Another highlight was the international spirit. For the first time, the United States, France, Germany, and Italy competed not on a battlefield, but in a test of technology and endurance. Despite their rivalry, the teams often helped each other survive. Drivers shared parts, fuel, and even food, because in the middle of Siberia, cooperation meant survival. The race also captured the public imagination like nothing before. Newspapers followed it daily, and ordinary people gathered to watch these strange, smoke-belching machines pass through their villages. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen a car, and it changed how the world viewed mobility forever. But behind the heroism were staggering challenges. The race had almost no rules. Teams could ship, tow, or even rebuild their cars if necessary. It wasn't just about skill. Luck and money played massive roles. The Protos team faced controversy for skipping sections of the route by train, and even though they arrived first in Paris, they were later penalized, giving victory to the Americans. The toll on the participants was immense. Drivers endured frostbite, starvation, and exhaustion. One misstep in the wilderness could mean death. Several cars were abandoned, swallowed by mud or snow, and never recovered. In the end, only 3 of the 6 cars made it to Paris. Yet, their struggle laid the foundation for modern endurance racing and proved that cars weren't toys. They were the future. The 1908 New York to Paris race was supposed to be impossible, and for most of the world it was. But the few who dared to try didn't just compete. They redefined what cars and people were capable of. When the Thomas Flyer rolled into Paris on July 30th, 1908, it wasn't just a victory for America. It was a victory for human willpower. 6 months, 22,000 miles, and 4 continents later, this machine and its crew had proven that the automobile wasn't a fragile experiment. It was a revolution in motion. That moment changed everything. Before this race, people believed the car was a rich man's toy. After it, they saw it as the future of travel. Roads began to improve, manufacturers raced to build stronger, more reliable vehicles, and the dream of global mobility was suddenly real. So what's the takeaway today? Every modern car, from an electric Tesla to a rugged off-roader, owes something to these early explorers. They showed that endurance, innovation, and determination could push technology beyond imagination. If this story teaches anything, it's that progress doesn't come from comfort. It comes from challenge. In 1908, the impossible race tested the limits of man and machine. In 2025, we're racing again, this time for sustainability, range, and smarter technology. The journey hasn't ended. It's just evolved. So if you ever doubt how far we've come, just remember, over a century ago, 6 cars left New York with nothing but courage and crude engines. And one of them made it to Paris. That's not just history. That's the spirit of every great car ever built, and that was the impossible race. 6 cars, 4 nations, and one unbelievable journey across the world. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have dared to race in 1908? Don't forget to subscribe. More incredible car stories and history's wildest automotive moments are coming your way.